Hey everybody, welcome to A Different Perspective. My name is Dr. Jason Nobles from The Wellness Way in Green Bay, and I am filling in for Dr. Patrick today as he is out doing one of his hormone connection talks. Today, what I want to talk about is statins and type 2 diabetes. Most of the time when people are thinking about statins, they're thinking about cholesterol, okay? So what I want to cover today is what happens when. Okay, so let's go to our first slide. So what I want to talk about first is the most important thing, right? Because statins most often are dealing with high cholesterol. They're prescribed for high cholesterol. They are the gold standard of treatment for high cholesterol. And when you look at the American Heart Association's website, what is cholesterol? Here, cholesterol is a waxy substance that comes from two sources, your body and food, right? So your body, especially your liver, makes all the cholesterol you need and circulates it through the body. But cholesterol is also found in foods from animal sources such as meat, poultry, and full-fat dairy products. Your liver produces more cholesterol when you eat a diet high in saturated fats and trans fats. So let's talk about that for a second. Do I disagree with most of that? No. Does it make more when we eat more, or does the stuff dietarily that we bring in increase? Now, there's been lots and lots of research dating back 70 plus years on this subject, but yes, it can, but why? See, the question that's never really asked when it comes to this is, why is the body making more cholesterol? And what is cholesterol for? Like it said, healing, repair, lots of different things. We're going to cover all of them today. But what I want to focus on is why we're here in the first place. So statins were prescribed starting back in 1987 for heart disease, okay? So let's take a look at the screen here. On the left side, you see on September 1st, 1987, lovastatin became the first statin to be approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and this agent is responsible for revolutionizing the treatment of high cholesterol, initially achieving peak annual sales of more than $1 billion American. Wow, that's a lot of money, okay? But then if you look over to the right, it says in 1987, nearly 3/4, 75% of all deaths in America caused by heart disease, cancer, stroke, and unintentional injuries or accidents. So what was number one? Heart disease. All right, yeah, perfect. So heart disease back in 1987 is the number one killer. Cholesterol medications, statins, were prescribed to treat and prevent heart disease and heart attacks. Okay, so how are we doing? Well, if we look at the statistics, this is a screen I shared from Bellin Health here in Green Bay, and if we zoom in, it says heart disease continues to be the number one killer of both men and women. A shameful statistic. When found early, heart disease can be treated and oftentimes reduced. So heart disease is still number one, while statins are being sold in the billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, right? So what does that mean? Well, like I said, how are we doing? So if we look at this pie chart here, you can see that in the top right corner, men and women, because it doesn't discriminate, heart disease is still the number one killer. So how come we've been doing this for, what, 13 plus 22, 35 years, and the outcomes which they hope to change are still the same? But yet every day, we're still prescribing more and more and more of these statins. Now there's a bunch of different statins, we'll get into that. But as we go, what we want to figure out is what changed over the years where this miracle cure didn't really change anything, okay? So let's talk about why I'm talking about this. Well, it's something that fits near and dear to my heart because that picture on the left is from 1987, the year statins were initially approved and starting to be sold. The next picture, 1993, 6 years later. Is that only 6 years later? Man. You can still see that looking at me, right? Because we always say you can't tell how healthy somebody is by looking at them from the outside, right? So if you look at that picture, you're thinking, oh, very fit, very athletic. Yes, absolutely, I was 100%. I was also eating a diet of constant fast food. Now, when I stopped playing football, and started being more of a couch potato. I was in college, I was doing a lot of studying and sitting around and not doing anything, and maybe a lot of things that I shouldn't have been doing. Either way, 2006 came around, and that's where the picture on the right is from. It was about this time that I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which brings us into what we're going to be talking about today, is why the correlation between type 2 diabetes and statins. Okay, so here's where it all started. If we go to this, I want you to read this. Okay, this is a big one. So this is the study that changed everything for people in this country. So what they wanted to do, if you look at the bottom, it says the rationale behind their experiment was to contradict the conclusion of Ansel Keys, who, from the University of Minnesota, the fish biologist, who said that dietary cholesterol has an effect on serum cholesterol. They wanted to disprove this. So what they did was this, and this is the best part. They wanted to show that fats in the diet increased cholesterol. So what they did was this. This is the beauty. You got to read this. Come on over. They tested these fats and oils by incorporating them into waffles, muffins, cakes, cookies, pie crust, biscuits, salad dressings, and spread for bread. So what they did was they put butter on bread, and when cholesterol went up, they blamed the butter and not the bread. Why is that important? Bread is a high carbohydrate, right? Waffles, cakes, pie crust, carbohydrate, 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 sugar, 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 sugar. And cholesterol went up. Weird. It's crazy. But from the conclusions of this study that was published by Dr. Hegstead and a couple others, they came up with this equation to show how much all these fats increased cholesterol, and increased cholesterol caused heart disease. Okay? But what was the missing point? What was really the culprit here? It was the sugar. So based on this, blaming the fats and the fact that the people who did the study were paid by the Sugar Research Foundation, they came up with this beauty, which is called the food pyramid. Now, you know what the food pyramid is, right? By now we know this is government forced into public schools. If public schools get funding, they have to feed the kids this way. Now, this is how we got diabetes, what I call the old-fashioned way, right? So back in 1980, this came out between like 1978 and 1980. In 1980, there was zero. In adolescence, there were 0 new cases of type 2 diabetes. Back then, they called it adult onset, right? So it makes sense that there was no cases of type 2 in adolescence. By 2010, new cases in adolescence, there's 57,638. From 0 to 57,638. What changed? It's how we're teaching people to eat. That's it. We teach them how to eat. Sugar's addictive. Studies have shown that sugar is just as addictive as cocaine. It lights up the brain the exact same ways, triggers those dopamine receptors and everything else to make you crave it, make you want it. So here's what happened. So when you look at the screen, I'm going to flip through these slides relatively quickly. But here, this is pulled directly from the CDC website, and this is starting in 1985. Okay, so this is obesity trends among just adults, doesn't take into kids, which they're using 30 pounds overweight for a 5'4" person, which means the BMI is over 30, right? BMI, keep in mind, is just height versus weight, right? So as we go through this, I'm going to flip through really quick. I'm going to stop once, and then I'm going to keep going. Are you ready? Now, 1985. I should point out in the fact that the bottom right corner, the higher the percentage, the higher the amount of obesity in those states, okay? So the lighter the color, the less. Darker, and then the colors, you'll see this is kind of fascinating. Ready? Okay. Now this is 5 years in, this is 1990. This is when they changed the name from adult onset diabetes to type 2. So from the onset of the food pyramid, it took them about 10 years to completely change the name of a disease, because now, instead of affecting just adults, now it's affecting kids. Now I'm going to keep going. (2010). Notice how in the beginning there was white, light blue, and dark blue, and now it's all gone. There's only orange, red, and black. And then the white's not actually white, because if you look really close, there's little speckles in there, which means the data was above what fit the parameters of the testing. So Now we have a national epidemic of obesity and diabetes. How'd that happen? Was it all of a sudden just everything changed and now everybody just genetically changed all the genes of all the people all of a sudden started causing all this? No. We put it instructionally in how we teach people to eat. Remember those plates to where it's got the rectangle and then you've got this square and you got this square, this square, this square, where here's the slice of pizza and here's the applesauce and here's this and that and the other. I remember growing up in grade school way back when, because if you can see by the beard, I grew up in those days. Pizza day was the best. And going back thinking about what that pizza tastes like, it was, but that's how we were fed, because pizza, they say, is the perfect food, right? Because if you look at the food pyramid, it's got the fruits, it's got the dairy, it's got the grains, it's got the cheese, it's got all the other stuff. So it's perfect food. Is it? So now, going back to those days, we go through how did we develop all that obesity, all that diabetes, and everything else? Well, quite simple. Insulin resistance. Now, this is how we got insulin resistance back in the day, right? We would eat food. It would be high in sugar because they had to change the food, right? Because when you get rid of all the sugar, food doesn't taste good. I should say, I said that backwards. When you get rid of all the fat, the food doesn't taste good. It tastes like cardboard. So what you do is you pump a bunch of sugar into it, okay? So you eat the food. When you eat, you break a fast, you produce insulin, okay? When you make insulin, too much insulin, because you're not supposed to eat that much processed sugar, you build up too much insulin, the cells resist it, which makes your body shove all that sugar into fat stores. You shove it in your liver and all these other things. You decrease your sugar very rapidly. You become tired and hungry. So what do you want to do? You want to sleep or you want to eat. So we eat. Then we make insulin. The cells resist the insulin. Then the sugar stores as fat. And then we get tired and hungry and then we eat again. So we get in this vicious cycle of going through this process over and over and over again. And what does that trigger? So insulin resistance, and I've shared this many, many times, triggers the downfall, of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, PCOS, and all these other things that are most of the leading causes of death in this country. Okay? So when I got to this point, I started digging a little bit. So what I wanted to do is do a little research. So I started studying. And then I started coming across these articles, right? So statins and their increased risk of inducing diabetes, right? Now, all these research articles are published on PubMed. So this isn't like just a Google search, not Wikipedia or anything like that. These are all on PubMed. So statins and their increased risk of inducing diabetes. Statin therapy and new onset diabetes. Molecular mechanisms and clinical relevance. Diabetogenic action of statins, how it works. So when we get to statins, what are they? Okay, so here's a simple definition. Statins, or HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, and I'm not going to read that long, 3-hydroxy-3, I might just read it, that is involved in the synthesis of mevalonate, a naturally occurring, that's the thing, naturally occurring substance that is then used by the body to make sterols, including cholesterol. And by inhibiting this enzyme, cholesterol and LDL production is decreased. Okay, is that good or bad? Statin also increase the number of LDL receptors on the liver, which enhances the uptake and breakdown of LDL cholesterol, and most of the effects of statins, including the blocking of HMG-CoA reductase, occur in the liver. Okay, this is a big deal because what does the liver do? About 1,500 different things that your body needs to survive. Okay, so when you think of it this way, we always ask the question, is the human body really smart or really stupid? Does the body make mistakes? No. So we're here in Green Bay. Now it's really hot outside. A couple of weeks ago, it was really cold outside. You go back a few months, it was really stink cold outside, to the point to where if we would walk outside butt naked, besides the people at the Packers game, right? If we were to walk outside butt naked, are your feet and hands going to stay warm? No, they're going to start to get really cold. They're going to go numb, right? You lose the feeling in your fingers and toes because the body is pulling blood away from your extremities to your core to protect your body and keep you alive. That's what it's supposed to do. And if we stay out there long enough, maybe we'll have to chop off a finger or toe because it just dies because it doesn't have any blood flow, right? But then if we come back inside, all that stuff goes back out to where it's supposed to. So we remove ourselves from balance or homeostasis. For a little bit, the body does really good at adapting, and then we come back in. If we come back in. But if we constantly push our body out of balance, we try to stay in that cold environment, eventually you're going to die because of what you're doing, right? So let's take a look at a picture of statins here. Now, if you look, there's a whole bunch of different ones, because if you look right here, top left picture right here, HMG-CoA, this is the event where it's going to block that. This is where statins work. You have acetyl-CoA, which helps create energy all the way down to cholesterol. So this is where it works right here. So it stops the body's production of natural cholesterol. So if you look at this little section right here, all these different statins, you got pravastatin, rosuvastatin, simvastatin, pitavastatin, lovastatin, torvastatin, cerevastatin, fluvastatin. That's a lot of statins. So all these little molecules up here are almost identical. There's a couple that are a little bit different, okay? And we're gonna kind of break from those in a little bit. But what I want you to do is kind of take a look at this, because this next slide is what we kind of refer to as every medication has side effects. And to build on that, they're never good side effects. Like, you never take a drug and you win $1 million and get a unicorn and a pony and all this fun stuff and have a great time. It's always call your doctor if. And who tells you that? Not us. It's the company who makes the medication tells you if this happens. If you go side effects of any drug online, it's going to tell you a list of things that it can do directly. So they're always adverse side effects. Okay? So let's take a look and see what the statins affect other than just that one HMG-CoA reduction. Okay? So if you look over here in the middle, you have statins. So statins and sugar balance, right? So if you look, statins affect the liver, the fat cells, the muscle cells, and the beta cells of the pancreas, which are responsible for regulating your blood sugar or glucose, right? All these things are, all of them. So increases free fatty acid accumulation, right? So that's a big one. Free fatty acid accumulation. Fat accumulation in the liver is also known as what? Fatty liver. Increases gluconeogenesis, which is making more sugar. So already we're getting more fat in the liver and increasing blood sugar. Then in the bottom left, the beta cells of the pancreas, we're going to get into that a little bit in a second here, but calcium channel blockers. GLUT2 is a glucose transporter, right? Insulin secretion, it decreases your body's ability to make insulin. If you're increasing your blood sugar and you're decreasing insulin, what do you call that? I call that diabetes. Okay? So then if we look at the fat cells, the adipocytes in the top right corner, you have GLUT4. Now GLUT4 is an insulin-dependent glucose transporter, primarily in muscle fat and heart muscle cells, that help pull insulin in and out. Okay? And then you have a decrease in adiponectin. A lot of people have not heard of adiponectin. So this is a hormone your fat cells release that increase your insulin sensitivity and decrease your inflammation. Pretty big deal here at the Wellness Way if you pay attention, right? Low levels are associated with several conditions, including obesity, type 2, and atherosclerosis, heart disease. So in this short period of time, based on this article, which pulled in all these articles, all this other research into one to kind of extrapolate the results of all the other research, they're saying that just in this little part right there, these statins are causing type 2 diabetes. But it's still the gold standard of preventing heart disease. So how is the prevention of heart disease causing heart disease? And why are so many people told that it's so important to take these things if these numbers get to a certain point? Well, let's break it down by the tissues, okay? So I'm not going to get too carried away with these because all these red arrows, you see this is a beta cell. Beta cells are the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin, okay? Where it says statins right there in the middle, all those red arrows going to the different tissues, that's where it's also having an effect. it's not just stopping that HMG-CoA reductase activity, it's also having all these things, right? So if we look, insulin secretion is initiated by, if you look down here at the bottom left-hand corner, these L-type calcium channels, okay? So what happens when we have an effect stopping these, this is what triggers the insulin release. So if we decrease the affinity here by these voltage-gated channels, voltage meaning, right, we have calcium, we have potassium, we have sodium, we have all these different electrolytes. Electrolytes produce electricity in the body, okay? And that electricity creates a charge and triggers those things to function, okay? Causes muscle twitches. Think if you have a deficiency or a imbalance, muscle cramps and stuff like that, to where you put in magnesium in the body and those muscles kind of relax because it helps create better electricity where one goes in, one goes out, okay? So when excuse me. So when glucose gets in through that calcium channel, what happens is it's broken down and it increases energy, or ATP, which closes the channels and helps entry and exit of calcium, leading to insulin release, okay? Specifically, simvastatin has been shown to specifically inhibit that. So one of the most common statins, simvastatin, actually blocks it, slows it down. It slows your ability to make insulin. And then sugar increases, and then all the other things that happen, insulin resistance, we have high triglycerides, we get fatty liver, we have an inability to make cholesterol properly, or we make too much in triglycerides, and all this other stuff starts to happen. It starts right there, okay? And then the GLUT2 up in the top right corner of the picture has a high affinity for glucose, but low capacity. It can't do what the calcium channels can do. So the transport into the cell, which triggers the insulin. Atorvastatin and pravastatin inhibit that. So now half the ones that we saw on that list that are the different types of statins are actually inhibiting the two best ways of actually secreting insulin. And now we can't manage our blood sugar. And now, I'll get to this when I get to the kind of the conclusion of the study, it's kind of funny, but the big thing you're always going to hear is the benefit outweighs the risk. The benefit of taking the statin to prevent heart disease outweighs the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, which causes heart disease. Isn't that just like peeing into the wind, right? Makes a huge mess all over the place. Now, it has effects in other cells, like I said, the fat cells, right? So the fat cells, it decreases adiponectin, which I said leads to obesity type 2 and atherosclerosis, and leptin. What is leptin? Leptin is the hormone produced by our fat cells that actually tells your brain to stop eating. So it's our hormone that tells your brain, I'm full, okay? One good way to tell if you're leptin resistant or not is, I always use the example of Thanksgiving dinner. Everybody goes, they eat Thanksgiving dinner, they get stuffed, they eat way too much, they go lay down on the couch and somebody breaks out the pie and they're like, I'm up, I'm ready, and they start grazing and picking and picking and picking and picking. It doesn't tell your brain you're full, stop eating, so you keep eating. Also what happens with inhibited leptin levels is that when you're in a fasted state, right, when you're not eating, once you burn through the available sugar stores, your brain should tell your body to say, all right, time to burn fat for energy, because fat is a much more long burning fuel than sugar. Sugar is always the easiest, it's the most easiest to grab and use and burn through and everything. It's like kindling on a fire. But you can keep a fire going for a long period of time if you keep throwing kindling on it, right? Once you run out, you throw a log, now you can sit back and relax because the fire is going to burn a lot longer. That's like a fat cell, okay? So leptin says, let's burn fat. But if we don't have the leptin, your body can't burn fat. So what do? We start compiling fat. Belly fat, fat in the liver. Once the liver is overloaded, it starts going into other organs like the pancreas, like the kidneys, like the heart, like the muscles, and everywhere else, okay? Then we have muscle cells. Now here's the big one. Muscle cells are the major tissue consuming most of the blood sugar that enters circulation. So it's mediated by that GLUT4 receptor, remember, and any disruption in glucose uptake by the muscles can result in type 2 diabetes. The muscles use it the fastest and the most efficiently, right? That's why we always say, what's the fastest way to lower your blood sugar? Work out, stress your muscles, lift weights. Your blood sugar will go down really rapidly, and then you can start pulling from stores, right? So blood sugar in the muscles is the most important one there actually is, okay? But the problem is, if we block these receptors and everything, we start accumulating free fatty acids in the muscles or fat, okay? And then simvastatin increases blood sugar levels despite increased insulin levels. So it's making it possible, when I just, describe that, increased sugar despite increased insulin, that's insulin resistance. Here's my best analogy for insulin resistance. Parents, you'll get this. And moms, you're gonna look at dad and be like, But, when the kids are in the other room, and they're being extremely loud, obnoxious, they're making a ton of noise, and dad's not moving, he's watching TV or whatever he's doing, he's sitting there, he's reading the paper, he's chilling out, and all of a sudden you get to the point of, can't you hear that? And the dad's like, huh? Dad's kid resistant. Even though the signals keep coming, we just don't hear them anymore. And then we're resistant to those. Yeah, it's happened to me many times. But that's what simvastatin will actually increase that resistance. Okay, then we have the liver cells, right? So liver cells, like I said, the action of the liver has about 15 different actions, but it will directly trigger increase gluconeogenesis, or making new sugar, which causes hyperglycemia, which is equivalent to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. And free fatty acid accumulation in liver can contribute to type 2 diabetes. All these actions are directly spelled out in all these mechanisms of how, yes, will it reduce HMG CoAs? Will it do exactly what they're supposed to do? Yes, a medicine will always do exactly what it's designed to do. I'm not going to deny it. That's what they're designed to do. If I take a high blood pressure medication, my blood pressure is going to go down. If my blood pressure is low and I take a high blood pressure medication, it's going to go lower. Medications will always do what they're designed to do. However, they'll also do these other things, okay? So in conclusion, what did this article come up with? So if you look, I highlighted these things in green. So although a number of questions remain unanswered, the available evidence supports that statins do increase the chances of type 2 diabetes. It is important to emphasize that there is still, like I said, a favorable risk-benefit ratio for statin therapy due to the large reduction in cardiovascular risk, which causes diabetes, which causes increased cardiovascular risk. Several mechanisms through which statin treatment causes beta cell dysfunction and insulin resistance peripheral tissues have been identified. Now, one thing I didn't really talk about, which the study really spells out, in that bottom section that you see highlighted, MIRs, that's microRNAs, not the messenger RNAs, that's mRNA, that's a little bit different. So the microRNAs are glucose homeostasis regulators. They regulate blood sugar. And those, through specific modulation of insulin signaling components, growing evidence indicates that statin modulation of MIR's expression may also be another mechanism to which statins increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. So we have all these 5 different places where it's going to have these unintentional, right? They're not intentional, they're not trying to cause diabetes, but they do. It's based on the side effects and what other effects they have. Now, besides diabetes, if we lower cholesterol with all these other things, what are the main things? Because everybody's told and scared the willies out of them that if you don't take this, you're going to die of a heart attack. Okay, could you? Sure. Is the cholesterol the problem? Nope. Is the testing incomplete? Yep. So what's the major testing? It's the lipid panel. You have your total cholesterol number, your HDL, the good cholesterol, the LDL, the bad cholesterol, and triglycerides. If you just look at that, really the only increase that's really clinically, in my opinion, relevant is the triglycerides. And you want your triglycerides definitely below 100, right? So the range is below 150. So when you break those things down, and here's where the testing is massively incomplete, you have particles. You have to take those LDLs, which stands for low density lipoprotein, The bad cholesterol is a protein? That doesn't make any sense. Yes, LDL stands for low density lipoprotein. It takes cholesterol out to somewhere where we need it in the body so that the body can heal and repair, because every cell wall has cholesterol in it and needs it for repair. If you have low cholesterol, watch how quickly skin and everything else starts to age. And then you have HDL, the good guys, that bring cholesterol back to the liver for processing. So here's the problem. If I have a cut, and this is where, just for example, well, let's say I have a heart attack, you're going to see an exorbitant amount of LDL and cholesterol at the scene of the damage. And then they're going to say, oh, look, he's at the scene of the crime. And then they're going to have another person with a heart attack, extremely large amount of LDL and cholesterol at the scene of the crime. That's like blaming police officers for bank robberies or fire departments for fires. Because every time you see a bank robbery or you see a fire, the police or the fire department are there. They're doing their job. That's it. So the body is trying to heal. And if we get in that way, we decrease the body's ability to heal. It's as simple as that. Okay? Now, this is another really fascinating, awesome study. In neurology, this is Neurology, the official journal of the American Academy of Neurology. Higher total cholesterol levels later in life are associated with reduced risk of dementia. Why? Here's why. So I broke down this pie chart. If you look over here, we have the brain composition. What is your brain actually made of, right? Pretty important to know. Little itty bit of sugar here in the green. In the red, protein. In the the yellow, fat. So 61% of your brain is composed of fat. 25% of that is cholesterol. So what happens when we reduce the cholesterol in the brain? The brain doesn't function the way it's supposed to, and now we're going into brain fog, decreased cognition, which increases the relevance of diagnosis of dementia. Okay? I remember growing up, I think in first grade, I heard of one person that had dementia. Somebody's, some friend of a friend's grandparent or something like that. Now it's everywhere. You can't throw a stick out in the street and not hit someone with it. And it's sad. But we have a reason why it's going that way, right? It's being caused by something very, very specific. So when you look at the human brain, the brain represents only 2% of your weight. So if about 4 pounds of brain I have apparently, but actually about 20% of your body's total cholesterol. 20% of your body's cholesterol is in the brain, where it's needed for normal brain function. It is vital to older people whose memory may be declining. So as we age, cholesterol should actually increase. Simple as that. So as people age, I always tell people what should be a good cholesterol number for you. Well, I'm 47 years old. So for me, I would look and I'd say I want my total cholesterol to be about 247. I want my triglycerides nice and low. I want my HDLs to be nice and high. And I want my LDLs to be nice and high. Really simple. Okay? Now, what about babies? Babies need plenty of cholesterol for brain development. Remember, we got to get that cholesterol into the brain. It's normally found in large amounts of breast milk. Problem with that is infant formulas contain little to no cholesterol whatsoever because people just, of the misnomers and how it's scary. It's kind of like probiotics in yogurt, right? It's got lactobacillus, it's got bifidobacterium and everything. One of the best beneficial bacteria you have is E. coli. Now, it's different from the parasite E. coli. But if you put E. coli on yogurt, nobody's going to buy it. So they just miss the boat on so many of these different fermented foods and all this other stuff because they won't put it in there, even though it's extremely beneficial for you. Now, there's also different strains of it you don't want in there, but at the same point, because of the press about it, it scares people away. So you look at these things and they're high in protein, high in sugar, and very extremely low in fat. And fat, like I said, most of the cholesterol in your body is in your brain. Well, 20% of the cholesterol is in your brain, and your brain is 60% fat. We need the fat. Don't be scared of the fat. What else does it do? Cholesterol is vital for nerve function. Like I said, the memory, the brain centers, all that fun stuff. Three-quarters of the myelin membrane is made from fat, and nearly a quarter of which is cholesterol. Brain synapses, where the nerves talk to each other, are made almost entirely from cholesterol. So memory loss is one of the first things as a sign of decreased cholesterol in the brain. The easy forgetfulness, the going from one place. Happens to me, my cholesterol is just fine, so it's probably some other brain damage that incurred with concussions or all that fun stuff. But you know, when you walk from the living room to the kitchen, you walk around in circles, you're like, if I just stay in here long enough, I'll remember exactly why I came in here. And then you walk out and then you turn around and say, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, I have those moments myself, but it's not from this. Right? I also had a couple of concussions where even later in life, wakeboarding and car accidents and things like that, football injuries, I got plenty of concussions, plenty of brain damage, but it's not from lack of cholesterol. So how do we heal the brain? Make sure that it has what it needs, eat plenty of fats and get plenty of cholesterol and stuff in there. Now, digestion, the gallbladder, digestion, we need fats because cholesterol is made in the liver, it's dumped into the bile, converted into the bile salts in the liver, dumped into the bile, because what's the gallbladder supposed to do? It helps break down and emulsify fats so we can digest them properly. Because the stomach produces the acid, its job is to sterilize everything, so when it gets into your digestive system, if there's anything living in there, it's dead. And then when the acid gets pushed into the small intestine, the gallbladder and the pancreas secrete a bunch of enzymes and bile to neutralize all that so we can absorb it properly. So what's the number one surgery in America? Get rid of the gallbladder. And now you can't emulsify fats, you can't absorb fats properly. Where do we need fats? Up in the brain. And then the brain can't function properly. Okay? Oh, and then something everybody that's been on a different perspective long enough is well versed of, hormones. Sex hormones are made from cholesterol, and they're these are stress handling, energy producing, reproductive hormones. And this is why serum cholesterol levels normally elevate with excessive or prolonged stress. They should increase with stress because you can take hormones and convert them from one form to the next to help the adrenals manage the stress. Because if you don't, if the cholesterol is low and the stress is high, you're going to create massive imbalances in your hormones. And with guys, with the stress response, it's really not as affected as much because when guys are stressed out, we stress out for 2 seconds. They're like, all right, let's get rid of this stress and we'll fix it and deal with it and have a beer. It really doesn't play that much of a role in our hormones because we have very low amounts of progesterone, estrogens, and things like that. Ladies should have nice, sufficient levels of progesterone and estrogen. But with prolonged stress, if there's no cholesterol, what happens is we drain out their progesterone to make more cortisol, and then we have this estrogen dominant balance. Estrogen dominance. What's the one hormone that's ever been related to breast cancer? The estrogens, the estrogen metabolites. Estrogens are metabolized in the liver, which also produces cholesterol, which, if we have a statin, increases the amount of fat in the liver, which disrupts hormone levels and hormone metabolism. Yeah. So can we then, hopefully you guys are familiar with this, can we then affect one thing without affecting the other? No, it's impossible, right? We always joke about how the big toe controls the heart. Can the big toe control the heart? Not directly, but indirectly, right? If I stomp on somebody's big toe, right? If I stomp on somebody's big toe, they're going to get stressed out, and that's going to increase their blood pressure, sorry. Or, ladies, can stress make your hormones go crazy? Or can your stress mess with your immune system? Absolutely. Now, we have specialists for all of those areas in our system, right? Every single one of them we have a specialist for. Can specialists hurt you? Dang right they can. So back in 1984, that's when the phrase was termed, an aspirin a day is good for your heart. Is that wrong? No, not really, because aspirin a day can help with blood pressure and everything else. But in the long run, it weakens blood vessels. Back in 1984, aspirin stroke wasn't even in the top 10 killers. By 1987, that stat I showed earlier, it was up in the top 4. Because what does aspirin do? It weakens the blood vessels. Where are the smallest blood vessels in your body? They're in your brain, right? Take somebody with weak blood vessels, they bump into something, they bruise really easily, right? You get all that, if you're bruising easily, your blood vessels are very weak. And with all the smallest blood vessels in the brain, now we're causing strokes. Now, if anybody does have a heart attack, what is the gold standard? Because I talk to everybody that has a heart attack and I say, so you're on a statin, you're on a blood pressure medication, and you're on an aspirin. Like, yep. It's the gold standard for treatment for prevention of another heart attack. Will that person have another heart attack? No, they'll have a stroke. All right, so lifestyle. Lifestyle has to be the key, right? So we have this list. This is a no sugar list. Now, a lot of people have heard the term of familial hypercholesterolemia. Now, I have a patient, I just talked to her yesterday or the day before. There goes the memory again, right? But she was diagnosed with familial hypercholesterolemia, and her doctor did the right thing. So he tested her particles, all the LDL breakdowns and everything else. So he tested her on all these things, and she was off the charts high in LDL particles. The smaller the particles get, the more and more damage they can cause, okay? So what she did, and he instructed her, eat more good healthy proteins, eat more good healthy fats. And she did, and she cut out all these sugars. You can see this is a list of sugars. And if you screenshot that, whatever you want to do, read labels, because those are a whole bunch of different words. Sometimes you might not even recognize them. I think there's one on there that said panocha, I think it said. Never heard of it before, but it's a sugar. And we look at all these things, and you got to realize how many different ways it's spelled out and put into different foods that you don't even realize you're eating it because it's just a different word. It doesn't say sugar, right? So we had the conversation today, is cane sugar bad? It depends, right? Can it be very good? Absolutely. Can it be good for a diabetic? Not really. But if you go to Hawaii, you can walk into the woods, chop down a piece of sugar cane, they grind it up, they put it in a glass for you. Real pure cane sugar actually does have antibacterial, antiviral properties. It's good prebiotic for your gut flora and everything else. But by the time we get it into the bag and in the store, it's just straight processed poison, okay? So she made all these changes. So think of all those particles like traffic. So her first test, she measured off the charts. They stopped counting, it was over 3,000. You want to be about 1,000 or so as far as the particles go. The less traffic in the bloodstream, the better, right? So she went down, all she did was change her lifestyle. We gave her a little bit of support, but she did all the work. And her numbers came down into about 2,100, which is still high. But is she familial, right? What's the term familial mean? It runs in families. What's that mean? As we grow up, we learn in our family how to eat, how to stress, how to do all these wonderful things, how to move and do all this other stuff. So it's really, from a lifestyle standpoint, how we eat, right? What goes into our body, how we move, do we exercise, do we sit, and how we think. Do we stress, do we have anxiety, do we have all these other things going on in our lives that we're constantly under a barrage of these things. The problem is we expect our body to respond the same every single day. And over time, we get tired. Our body gets tired, and it starts to break down if we keep doing the wrong things and giving it the wrong things. On the flip side, if you keep giving it the right things, keep modulating your stress, keep working out and stressing out your body in good ways. There's not always good exercise. Keep that in mind. I'm not saying all exercise is good, but then the body gets stronger. So the body won't wear out. It'll rust out really quick. And sugar and all these other wonderful things that cause diabetes and all these other things that trigger the body to cause its own diabetes causes oxidation. Oxidation is rust. When the body starts to rust out from the inside, they were just not going to take that long to break down. Okay? So keep in mind of this. Wellness Way is simple, right? We're a network of health restoration clinics that think and act differently to solve the health challenges that others can't. So when we're looking at these labs, we're looking at all these things, we're using their research, right? Their research says different things about different things. And when you look at the research, it says, for the most part, these are good interventions to prevent one thing. But what else does it cost? Right? Like I said, everything good, according to the research, benefit doesn't outweigh the risk. Not with that. Okay? So, to find out, especially if you're on a statin, whether or not you should be taking a statin, the proof is in the pudding, right? The proof is in the sugar-free pudding that's gluten-free, organic, and all those other things. The proof is in the testing. The problem is the testing, for the most part, is just incomplete. Can they do the full proper testing? Yes, absolutely. If you want the full proper testing done, find a Wellness Way doctor to help you discover what is the proper testing for you. And then they can get to the bottom of why your body is feeling the way it is and get you to where your body wants to feel, get you to where you want your body to feel, I should say, okay? And vice versa. So with that, I want to say thank you for Dr. Patrick for letting me come on and do today's different perspective. Hopefully you guys gleaned a little bit of knowledge for that, and so push you in the right direction, or share it with somebody you know that needs to hear it. And then I will be back one of these days to talk about some other topics. So make sure you keep feeding us your questions and everything else, because that's where we get a lot of these ideas from. Otherwise, I want to say thank you for having me on today. Like I said, Dr. Jason Nobles from the Wellness Way in Green Bay. You guys have a fantastic Saturday.
Hey, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single video or live stream. Also, share this video with a friend. Once again, thank you for watching.